Welcome back to the deep dive. So, we are continuing our swim through the Connected Ideas project,
We are.
specifically that whole series they're doing on the science of responsible innovation. And I have to say, the source material we're covering today, episode 57 by Alexander Titus, it starts with a premise that feels, I don't know, incredibly soothing.
Soothing. That's not a word I usually hear when we talk about tech governance.
No, really.
Usually it's more like terrifying or impossibly complicated.
It's soothing because it feels so organized. We're talking about the zone of proportionality. It's this, framework of green, orange, and red zones for technology.
Okay.
It just appeals to that part of my brain that wants the world to make sense. Green means safe, go for it. Orange, caution, you need some oversight. Red, stop, danger, high risk. It's like a traffic light for the future.
It is seductive, isn't it?
Yeah.
It feels like logic.
Exactly.
It feels like math. You just plug a technology into the equation, and pop, it spits out a color.
Yes. But that is exactly where the comfort ends, because the moment you actually try to use this traffic light in the real world, the bulb just blows out.
Right.
Titus's main argument here isn't about how great the zones are. It's about the brutal reality of trying to assign them.
Exactly. The source basically argues that the framework is the easy part. I mean, anyone can draw three boxes.
Right.
The uncomfortable truth of responsible innovation is that deciding which box a new technology goes into, that's not a calculation, it's a fight.
And not just a technical fight, it's a political one.
It's political, it's social, it is messy. We all love the idea that if we just get enough smart people in a room with enough data, the correct answer will just appear.
Yeah, that's the dream.
But today's deep dive is really about why reasonable, rational experts, people looking at the exact same spreadsheets, will absolutely tear each other apart over whether something is green or red.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission today is to understand why we can't agree on safety and why classifying technology isn't a math problem. Let's start by shattering that illusion of objectivity, because I'll admit, I am that person who thinks, hey, just feed the specs into the model, assess the blast radius, and tell me if it's safe. Why is that such a trap?
It's a trap because it assumes risk is an intrinsic property of the technology itself. Like a grenade is risky because it's a grenade. But for emerging tech, especially things like AI or synthetic biology, risk it's relational.
Relational, how do you mean?
Risk is the relationship between a system and the specific world it enters. You can't calculate the risk without knowing three things: context, infrastructure, and power.
Okay, those are some big abstract nouns. Let's ground this a bit.
Sure. So think about severity. How bad can it get? That depends entirely on context.
Mm-hmm.
Or think about reversibility. If we mess up, can we fix it? That depends completely on your infrastructure.
And distribution, who gets hurt?
That depends on power.
The source used a really vivid example about AI and biology that I think just nails this. It was about an AI model designed for drug target prioritization.
Right. Essentially, using AI to find new ways to interact with human biology to cure diseases.
Yeah.
This is the cutting edge of personalized medicine.
Which sounds like the definition of a green zone technology. We want cures, we want to live longer. Put it in the green box. Stamp it approved.
Yeah. In scenario A, absolutely. Imagine that AI model is sitting inside a major pharmaceutical company.
Okay.
It's inside a highly regulated pipeline. It's used by vetted scientists who have spent 20 years in the field.
Yeah.
There are physical safeguards on all the chemicals.
So if the AI suggests a molecule that, turns out to be toxic, the scientists spot it or the lab protocols catch it.
Exactly. In that context, the risk is low. And this is crucial. It is reversible. They just don't make the drug.
Right. It just stays as lines of code.
Green zone.
But the code for that AI model doesn't change if you just, email it to someone else.
And that's scenario B. Take that exact same model, same weights, same architecture, release it openly on the internet. Now, you pair it with those new automated cloud labs where you can order chemical synthesis remotely. You remove the vetted scientists. You remove the oversight.
Suddenly, that tool isn't just finding cures. It's identifying which molecule combinations can bypass standard water filters or, God forbid, which ones are most lethal in small doses.
And it's teaching a bad actor how to make them. The technology didn't change. The code is identical. But the context shifted from a secure lab to the open web.
So is the AI model green or red?
Well,
It's both. Or it's neither. It depends on where it lives. That is just wild.
Precisely. So when you see experts arguing over whether an open source AI model is safe or dangerous, they aren't actually arguing about the software. They're arguing about the world the software lives in.
One side is imagining the lab,
And the other is imagining the garage.
and neither of them is technically wrong.
No. And that is why it's so frustrating. If it was a math problem, we could check the work. But this brings us to the core of the conflict. If we aren't fighting about facts, what are we fighting about? Frames.
This section of the source material, it really made me rethink my own arguments. Titus suggests that most disputes are actually clashes of values hidden behind all the technical language. He breaks it down into 3 specific frames. The first one is reference harms.
Right. This is kind of the what keeps you up at night frame. It defines what you see as the primary enemy.
Yeah. So on one side, you've got the clinicians and the researchers.
Their reference point is harm that is already happening. Think about a doctor treating late-stage cancer, or a climate scientist watching the ice shelves melt. For them, the status quo is a disaster.
People are suffering right now.
Right now.
So if you delay a technology that could fix those things because you're worried about some hypothetical risk, you aren't being safe. You are actively letting people die.
Exactly. To them, inaction is a moral failure. Delay is the problem.
I feel that. I'm naturally impatient. I see a problem. I want the tool to fix it. Why are we waiting? People are sick. Release the model.
But then you have the security professionals and the bioethicists. And they aren't looking at the patient in the bed. They're looking at the tail risk, the low probability, high severity events.
The oops, we accidentally engineered a pandemic that wipes out 30% of the population scenario?
Correct. For them, a 1% chance of catastrophe outweighs a 99% chance of a cure. Because if you hit that 1%, game over. It's irreversible.
So you have one group screaming, hurry up, people are dying, and another group screaming, slow down, you might kill everyone.
And they are both looking at the exact same data. They are just solving for different variables. One is solving for maximum benefit, the other for minimum existential risk.
That distinction leads right into the second frame, time horizons. And this isn't just about patience. It's about, what gets rewarded.
This one is subtle, but it's huge. Institutional incentives play a massive role here.
Right.
Immediate harms are vivid. They're legible. You can take a picture of a patient who needs help today.
But you can't take a picture of a crisis you prevented 10 years from now.
Exactly. Long-term harms are abstract. They're statistical. And the source makes a really sharp point here. We reward people for fixing today's problems. A hospital administrator gets a bonus for solving a bed shortage now. They don't get a bonus for preventing a theoretical cyber attack in 2035.
So the dispute over the zones is actually masking a disagreement about when harm matters.
And who it matters to. Which brings us to the third and probably most contentious frame, power positions.
The upside versus downside dynamic.
It turns out your opinion on whether a technology is green or red depends heavily on your zip code, your job title, and maybe your bank account.
Are you an upside capture or a downside risk bearer?
Exactly.
I'll be honest, I usually fall into the upside capture camp. I look at new tech and I see the efficiency, the profit, the cool new capabilities, investors, developers, even governments looking for a strategic edge. We all look at the green zone and see opportunity. Look at what this can do.
Which is natural. Innovation is exciting. But you have to ask, who bears the risk if it goes wrong?
Right.
It's usually not the investor. It's the patient whose data gets leaked. It's the worker whose job gets automated without a safety net. It's the community living next to the chemical plant.
They see the red zone much more clearly because they don't have a parachute.
Right. Pretending that classifying a technology as some neutral, objective act just hides those power dynamics. It's very easy to declare a technology safe when you have a security detail and a bunker, metaphorically speaking. It looks very different from the warehouse floor.
That's a sobering thought. It means that safety is actually a privilege in some contexts.
It is, and if we don't acknowledge that, we aren't having an honest conversation. We're just asserting our power.
So we have all these different frames. We have people prioritizing different times, different harms, different outcomes. And to make matters worse, the source points out that early in a technology's life, we are dealing with massive uncertainty.
Massive. We don't actually know what will happen.
So the ambiguity invites projection.
Exactly. Since the data is sparse, optimists fill the gaps with their hopes, and pessimists fill them with their fears. Both sides are essentially plugging values into the variables where data should be.
And this is where things can get toxic. The source lists 3 specific pathologies that happen when this disagreement stops being productive and starts becoming, theater.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we've all seen these play out on social media or in congressional hearings.
Yes. These are the ways we break the governance system.
Okay, the first one is zone inflation.
Zone inflation. This is when you rhetorically push a technology toward the red zone, not necessarily because the technical evidence supports it, but because red confers moral authority.
It's the boy who cried wolf strategy. If I say this is existential, if I say this is the apocalypse, you have to listen to me.
Precisely. If everything is the end of the world, then total restraint is the only defensible posture. It's a way to shut down debate by raising the stakes to infinity. If I say, this AI might generate a slightly offensive email, we can debate policy. If I say, this AI will enslave humanity, the debate is over. You have to stop it.
It's an effective rhetorical trick for a little while, but it just burns out everyone's adrenaline. But then you have the equal and opposite reaction, zone denial.
Which is just as dangerous. This is minimizing or dismissing risks to keep technologies in the green zone. Oh, that's not a bug, that's a feature. Or, hallucinations. We'll fix that in the next patch.
Move fast and break things, basically.
Until the thing you break is democracy or the power grid. It's kicking the can down the road until the can explodes. It's often driven by commercial pressure to just get the product shipped.
And the third one, this one sounds the most devious to me, is zone laundering.
Zone laundering is fascinating and insidious. This is where you frame a system narrowly to avoid scrutiny. You present a tool as green by ignoring the larger context it operates in.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. Imagine a company releasing a tool that helps maximize user engagement. They frame it as a simple, harmless marketing optimizer. It just shows people what they like. It's just math. Green zone.
Okay, sounds innocent enough.
But in reality, to maximize engagement, the tool ends up radicalizing users, promoting conspiracy theories, and destabilizing elections because anger drives clicks. They laundered the risk by focusing on the component, the code, rather than the system, the social impact. It's like selling a lock-picking kit as a hobbyist puzzle tool, knowing full well it's being marketed to burglary rings.
You claim green, but the outcome is red.
Exactly.
And the consequence of all 3 of these, inflation, denial, and laundering, is that they completely erode trust.
Completely. If I think you're inflating risk just to get funding or attention, I stop listening. If I think you're laundering risk to make a quick buck, I stop trusting your products. And then the whole governance system just collapses because nobody believes anyone else is acting in good faith.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty bleak picture here. We've established that we can't just calculate the zone. We've established that we are prone to fighting about it based on our values. And we've established that bad actors will try to game the system. So, who decides, that's the title of the source, who decides the zone of proportionality?
The answer is going to disappoint you if you want a dictator or a single genius. No single actor can do it.
I was afraid you were going to say that. I wanted a name. I wanted a director of global safety.
It just doesn't work that way. The source argues for pluralistic classification.
Which sounds like a very fancy way of saying committee.
It's more structured than that. It's not just a random group. You need a specific cast of characters at the table, and they all hold a piece of the puzzle that the others don't have.
Okay.
First, you need technical experts to assess capability. What can this thing actually do?
Makes sense.
Second, you need domain experts to understand real-world impact. How does this affect biology or finance or logistics? Third, you need governance bodies to weigh systemic risk.
So scientists, industry experts, and bureaucrats.
But that's not enough. Crucially, and this is where most current models fail, you need affected communities.
The people who actually have to live with the consequences.
Right. The downside risk bearers. They articulate the lived consequences that the experts in the lab might completely miss. The engineer sees efficiency. The community sees displacement. You need that friction.
But let's be real. That sounds like a lot of people yelling at each other in a room. It sounds slow. It sounds like gridlock. How do you get anything done?
It might be slow. But here is the key shift that Source asks us to make. The goal isn't consensus. The goal isn't unanimity. The goal is legitimacy.
Legitimacy. How is that different from agreement?
Think about a court case. Half the people leave the courtroom unhappy with the verdict. One side lost. But if the trial was fair, if the evidence was heard, if the process was transparent, they usually accept the legitimacy of the outcome.
Ah.
They accept that the system worked, even if they didn't get what they wanted.
So even if I don't agree that this tech should be in the orange zone, I can respect the process that put it there.
Exactly. A science of responsible innovation structures the disagreement. It surfaces the assumptions. It documents why we disagree. We are putting this in orange not because we agree on the risk, but because we have identified this specific uncertainty that we need to monitor.
I like that. It moves us from I'm right, you're wrong to here are my assumptions versus your assumptions. It makes the disagreement visible.
And it allows decisions to evolve. If we document why we disagreed, say we disagreed on how fast the tech would improve,
Yeah.
and then new evidence comes in 6 months later, we can say, assumption A was wrong. Let's move the zone.
It turns governance into a scientific process rather than a shouting match.
Right.
This actually brings us to a really cool reframing of the zones themselves. I think a lot of us see red as bad or evil and green as good, like we want to win the game by getting everything into green.
Yes, we moralize the colors, but the source says we should think of them as types of conversations.
Break that down for me.
An orange zone designation doesn't mean unsafe. It means under active stewardship. It means we are watching this closely because the variables are volatile. It's a zone of learning.
Okay.
A red zone designation isn't evil. It means constrained. It just means the cost of failure is simply too high to allow unrestricted access right now.
That makes it feel so much less judgmental. It's not about the morality of the tool, it's about the management of the consequence.
And here's the kicker. Disagreement over zones isn't a sign that the framework failed.
It's not.
It is evidence that the framework is being used correctly.
Wait, really? The fighting is a feature, not a bug.
If everyone instantly agreed, it would probably mean someone is engaging in zone denial or zone inflation. Real innovation at the frontier is messy. The friction is the point. The friction is where the safety happens. It forces us to look closer.
I love that. It reminds me that democracy isn't about everyone holding hands. It's about how we handle the fact that we don't.
Precisely. But there is one final, difficult challenge the source warns us about. Governance latency, the lag time. Building institutions capable of this kind of judgment under uncertainty, is incredibly hard work. It's harder than building the technology itself.
Yeah.
We have 21st century tech running on, in some cases, 20th or even 19th century governance logic.
So the tech moves at the speed of light, literally, in the case of fiber optics, and the deciders move at the speed of a committee meeting scheduling email.
And closing that gap, building institutions that can be agile, pluralistic, and legitimate is the hardest work ahead for responsible innovation. It's not just about better code. It's about better organizations. It's about being able to make provisional decisions and update them as we learn.
This has been such a dense but clarifying discussion. It really changes how I look at headlines about AI safety or biosecurity. It's not just tech support arguing, it's a clash of worldviews.
It is, and it requires humility. We have to accept that our initial classifications are provisional. We will get it wrong. We'll put something in green that should be orange. We'll put something in red that could have been green.
Right.
The key is building a system that allows us to admit that and fix it fast.
So, to wrap this up for our listener, the key takeaway is that safety isn't a math problem, it's a social negotiation. And this deep dive, centered on the politics of proportionality, really highlights that we can't escape the human element.
And you, as the listener, have a role in that. Whether you are a developer, a user, or just a citizen, your frame matters. When you react to a new technology, ask yourself, am I an upside capture or a downside risk bearer? Am I looking at immediate harm or tail risk?
I want to leave everyone with a final thought from the source material that really stuck with me. Alexander Titus writes, "At the frontier of technology, humanity is the experiment."
That's a powerful line.
It is. We are the test subjects. So the true test of proportionality isn't eliminating conflict, but governing through it.
Well said.
So next time you see a new gadget or a new AI model and you wonder, is it safe? Ask yourself, who is deciding and what frame are they looking through?
And maybe ask yourself, what frame am I looking through?
That's the deep dive for today. Thanks for swimming with us.
Until next time.